Services Subcommittee of Ways and Means, and today we will be talking about the Department of Children and Families. First up, I have Dylan Deere from Kansas Legislative Research Department. Afternoon, Dylan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I'm a managing analyst with the Legislative Research Department. If I start speaking too fast, tell me to slow down. But I will take a relatively circuitous path through this budget. I'll try to signpost my way by page numbers as we go along. I also have Secretary Howard here to be able to answer questions for the agency, and I believe there's also some other interested parties present as well. So starting on the first page, just a quick overview of the Department for Children and Families budget. The Department of Children and Families is the cabinet agency whose mission is to protect children, promote healthy families, and encourage personal responsibility. If you could turn to page 5. So there was an SGF reappropriation for this agency. The total was $14.8 million. That was one adjustment to the $374.1 million that was previously appropriated to the Department of Children and Families. The majority of that reappropriation is a result of the caseloads. So the agency estimate, and this is on page 5, submits a FY 2023 revised estimate of $966.3 million, including $388.9 million SGF. It's a decrease of $35.6 million or 3.6% below the 23 approved budget. And those reductions are all contained in federal or special revenue funds. So the SGF request is the same, and the reductions you're seeing there are in federal and special revenue funds. I'll sort of walk through the numbered lists, because the numbered list will show your change by item from the approved. So item 2, child care stabilization. There's a deletion of $104.1 million, all from special revenue funds for the child care sector grants during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the overwhelming majority of those funds were expended during fiscal year 2022, by the end of fiscal year 2022. Turning to page 6, child care quality. There's the addition of $44.3 million, all from the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant for child care bonuses, career pathways, and other activities funded by ARPA. On item 4, information technology, you have the addition of $9.4 million in additional special revenue funds, and also allocations of some of the SGF reappropriations funding to enhance funding for CCWIS, that's the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System, and the Kansas Management Information System, KMIS, for information technology projects. My understanding there's for the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System, there's 3 RFPs that are going out currently with about $13 million spent in the current year and then $4 million in ongoing spend. And for the KMIS RFP, that's currently in negotiation and waiting to go out. For child support services, you have the addition of $1.8 million in additional special revenue funds and allocations of additional SGF reappropriations for child support services. And this is for increased expenditures related to a replatforming of the CSS case management system. There is an audit that's going to come out in March on some of that child support enforcement information from the Division of Legislative Post-Audit. On prevention and protection services, item 6, you have the addition of $4.7 million, all from federal funds for various PPS initiatives. And those largest increases are tied to family resource centers, $750, crisis hotline marketing, $432, pre-petition legal services grants, $785, and behavioral services intervention services, $500,000, as well as some additional information technology updates and the addition of 6 FTE positions tied to some of these new programs. For utilities assistance, you have the addition of $17.2 million, all from federal funds. For utility assistance, including $10.6 million for energy assistance and $6.6 million for water assistance. And that's tied to 14 additional FTE positions as well. And that is a new LIHEAP grant, federal grant. Under child care assistance, you have the deletion of $9.3 million, all from the Child Care Development Block Grant for child care assistance, and that reduction is largely attributed to the basically federal funding being exhausted. Under capital improvements, you have the addition of $500,000, all from the building maintenance fund for the remodeling of the lobby and interview rooms and the Topeka Service Center. This basically brings it back to last year's original request. The governor recommended and the legislature adopted a reduced number of like 450,000. So this brings it back to their original request to do those projects on that service center. And all other projects, so all other things put together after you take 1 through 9 out, leaves you with a deletion of $36,686. And there's an additional 4 FTE positions. And you can see some deletions on those first 3 bullets and some additions and reallocations in the next 8 bullets or so. And those are just sort of those programs being implemented, those funding running out, and then those positions being reallocated. If you could turn to page 7, the governor's recommendation includes $974.5 million, including $394.3 million SGF. It's an all funds increase of $8.3 million or 0.8%, including an SGF increase of $5.4 million. The only adjustment made by the governor is the adoption of the caseloads. Okay, so for TANF caseloads, you have the deletion of $750,000 in TANF funds, and for foster care, you have the addition of $9 million, including $5.4 million SGF. This body has probably heard the caseloads discussion quite a few times, so if I just have that request, I can go over this one more time, if that's what you want. Otherwise, I would stand for questions on the fiscal year 2023 agency request. Questions?
I do have one question. Just on item 7, the water assistance, is that to help pay water bills?
That's correct.
Not to fix anything?
That's correct.
Okay. It seems like it's new.
There has been a LIHEAP program for some time. It's included quite a few utilities. It's both energy and water.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead and continue, please.
All right, moving to fiscal year 2024. I'm going to start on page 15, all right, with the enhancement requests. And I sort of walk through the enhancement requests on this page because you can see what the request was and whether or not the governor recommended it or whether the governor partially adopted it immediately. And then we'll move back to the agency request, if that works for everybody. So there was an enhancement request for the Child Welfare Information System with the addition of $25 million, including $12.5 million SGF. And that system that you saw the previous enhancement for in 23, or not enhancement, but expenditures for, would tie the Family and Child Tracking System FACS, the Kansas Initiative Decision Support KIDS, the Kansas Intake Investigation System KIPS, and the National Youth in Transition Database and the Statewide Contractor Reimbursement Information and Payment System, SCRIPS. So it's those various legacy databases that is intended to reintegrate. The governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for placement rates for foster care. This is the addition of $5.1 million SGF, and this is to increase the monthly foster care rates to relatives and non-related kin placements to 70% of the licensed foster home rates. So currently, non-related kin placements and relatives get a lower rate. So the governor recommends adoption of this enhancement. For human services salaries, there's an addition of $5.8 million, including $3 million SGF to raise the salaries of human services and related positions by as much as 15%. And the governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. These employees would qualify for the 5% salary adjustment that's part of the governor's centralized recommendation. There was an enhancement tied to HB 2448 of $1.5 million, including $451,727 SGF and 8 FTE positions that will be assigned to case management duties as career navigators within the SNAP and Employment Training Program. The governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for vocational rehabilitation services. This adds $1.1 million, including $233 SGF for VR services, and that enhancement would increase the reimbursement rates by 10% for direct service providers in rehabilitation services. And the governor recommends adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for Centers for Independent Living that adds $216,783 all SGF to increase the reimbursement rates by 10% for the CILs. And this is primarily for older individuals who are blind, and the governor recommends adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for Human Services, EBITS, and that is Executive Branch Information Technology Department. It would basically specialize IT for Human Services, and the governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for pre-petition legal services, which adds 1 million SGF to expand a program providing pre-petition legal assistance to parents and children ages 0 to 17. The governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement to family resource centers, which adds 3.1 million SGF to assist in establishing and supporting 25 family resource centers statewide. Those family resource centers provide things like assistance to families and communities to provide and identify and access services. The governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. Turning to page 17. There's an enhancement to We Can Drive. This is the addition of 1 million SGF for the We Can Drive program for fiscal year 2024. That's a typo. And the 2022 legislature provided $250,000 to pilot the program in the DCF region. So this was previously had a pilot program that was approved by the legislature. The governor recommended partial adoption of this enhancement at the $250,000 level. I have been told that would allow it to expand beyond that region, but the agency could elaborate on exactly how much coverage that would provide. There's an enhancement for independent living subsidy for youth, which adds 1.2 million SGF to increase the monthly assistance subsidy for adults ages 18 to 20 who have exited foster care. That would take it to 125% of the poverty level. And the governor recommends partial adoption of this enhancement at 417,109, and that would increase the monthly independent living assistance subsidy to 100% of the federal poverty level. There's an enhancement for operating expenses of 1.4 million, including 638,664, and it's for the operating costs inside of the agency. The governor does not recommend adoption of that enhancement. There's an enhancement for foster care, SSA, and SSI funds, which is an addition of 7.6 million, including 7.6 million SGF and one additional FTE position. This program would allow children in foster care to basically retain their SSA, SSI funds in an account, so they would kind of have a nest egg when they leave the program. Currently, that funding is used to offset the costs for the foster care program. The governor does not recommend adoption of this enhancement. There's an enhancement for fostering connections and maintenance of effort. And this is the addition of $1 million SGF to enhance the maintenance of effort contributions for state-funded adoption support clients. And there are some specialized rules from 2008 under Title IV-E that allows you to use non-SGF dollars in order to be able to match the MOE. And so the states have recently been allowed to use any state funds spent in their Family First programs towards their Fostering Connections Act MOE. At the end of federal fiscal year 2021, the agency indicates there is a $7.8 million deficit in the reported MOE because of the use of some other funds. The governor does not recommend adoption of that enhancement. There's an enhancement for the child care development funds of 1.5 million, and the purpose of this is just draw down some additional funds. I've been told that we're not drawing down the total amount of the grant. And going from there to page 12. This is taking us back to, this is just more portions of the agency request. It's just that enhancement portion, just told you exactly which of the enhancements were recommended by the governor. So I thought that was valuable. So if you look at page 12, like item 15, all right. So these are those other non-enhancement sort of adjustments that are part of the budget. So we've only right now gone through things that are considered to be enhancements to the budget. These are the rest of these will be adjustments to the base. So economic and employment services programs deletes 137.6 million, including $2 million SGF. And the major adjustments include the deletion of 160.2 million from COVID-19 pandemic child quality grant programs and 24.3 million in utility assistance programs. You remember we talked about the additional 14 million in LIHEAP? Okay, so that 14 million would actually offset this 24.3 million that you see here. In the administration program, you have the deletion of 18.4 million, including 9.2 million SGF in the administration program. And this is a deletion of 15.9 million from the information technology program budgeted for CWIS and KEYS, and the deletion of 2.2 million for executive administration programs for contingency contracts and imaging fees. On the child welfare information systems, one, the enhancement would offset this reduction, although it was not recommended by the governor. For the 17 client services delivery programs, you have deletion of $5.2 million, including $2.2 million SGF for client services delivery programs. The majority of the reduction, $4.0 million, is related to economic and employment services eligibility and child and adult protective services field staff. And it increases the shrinkage rate to 11.5% due to the loss of federal pandemic relief funding. The shrinkage rate for the agency in 23 is 7.9%, and in 24, it has an overall shrink rate of 11.4%. For capital improvements, there is no capital improvements requests in FY24, so that's a deletion of $950,000, and all other adjustments deletes $1.6 million, and it's spread across a bunch of multiple subprograms, but it's mostly economic and employment services and the vocational rehabilitation services. If you turn to page 13, under the governor's recommendation, the governor recommends expenditures of $817.1, including $389.3. It's an all funds decrease of 38.1, or 4.5%, including an SGF decrease of 22.8, or 5.5% below the 24 agency request. Those first two paragraphs underneath the GovRec on page 13, that's really just the enhancements that we've kind of already walked our way through. Some additional adjustments. Item 21 is TANF caseloads. So you have the deletion of $900,000, all from federal funds for TANF caseloads. And item 22 is foster care caseloads, which is the addition of $8 million, including $7.4 million SGF for foster care caseloads. It's an all funds decrease of $1 million, including the SGF increase of $2 million from the 23 revised estimate, if you were to look at it that way. Depends on whether you look at the agency request or the previous revised estimate for TANF caseloads. Those rate increases are partially offset. So basically, there was a big decrease because of the foster care workforce recruitment program, which is a one-time expense of $7.5 million, and the COM development bonus, which is $450,000. Once again, a one-time expenditure, but it was partially offset. Those decreases in the foster care caseloads are partially offset by new programs such as the FTP program, which is the failure to place, which is a new program inside of DCF to reduce the time that children might be spent in offices. And turning to page 14, everything up until 34 are all enhancement requests, which we've already covered. All right, and the last item is 35, which is Hope Ranch. The governor recommends a deletion of $300,000 SGF for the Hope Ranch pilot program for fiscal year 2024. According to the governor, the Hope Ranch is a program that combats human trafficking in adults. And so the allegation is that this is not the appropriate agency to place that within. That was a recommendation by the legislature. With that, I would stand for questions on the agency request and governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2024. And the agency is also here for additional clarification.
Thank you, Dylan. We flip around so quickly. Trying to get back to the correct page. It has to do with the foster care driving instruction.
The We Can Drive program.
17. Thank you. And maybe the secretary can answer this. Maybe it's a total different reason, but you know, when we did the 10-year transportation plan, we put in $300 scholarships for any kid up to 30 years old that wants to learn how to drive. Not a kid at 30 anymore, but I think it went to 30. Reason being, a lot of millennials and others just put off learning how to drive, and so it doesn't totally pay for everything, but it's my understanding, the last time I checked, that the program is working and people are taking advantage of it. And so so this seems kind of like an addition to that, and just curious if the agency, and I'm sure the secretary can answer that question, as to why we didn't look there first. So, well, a lot of information here to look through. Committee members, do you have any questions before we move on to the secretary? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dylan. I just have a question on the removal of $300,000 for the Hope Ranch. I see in the notations that the governor notes funding that addresses the human trafficking of adults should be placed in an agency that assists adults and should go through the state bid process to determine the appropriate level of funding for services. Is that occurring? Is there a process for that to be taken care of through an agency, through the bid process?
So I would defer to the agency on this particular item. I didn't see funding for Hope Ranch added to any other budget, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
But it's possible that I simply missed it, but I didn't notice it there.
And so I just want to understand clearly, so we're removing $300,000 for the Hope Ranch, but in our 2023 budget, and I understand it's from capital outlay, there's $500,000 approved for remodeling a lobby. Am I understanding that correctly?
So there was $500,000 approved, there was $950,000 requested, that's correct.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Dylan. Next, we will continue with the Secretary, Secretary Howard, Department of Children and Families. I do want to share that I think last year I asked that I didn't want a 60-page deck, and I see that you've just lowered the font to 8, and now it's 30. So, you know what I'm going to say. Please hit the highlights.
That's what I
we
plan
need
to do,
know.
Senator. You can see I have just a few pages with a few stickies on them.
We'll enjoy
so-
the rest of this reading tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yeah, Laura Howard, the Secretary of DCF. And in that spirit, I will actually move you past the first several pages of the document that just give kind of agency overviews, what are our major programs, and move you to page 10 of the document. And I won't spend a lot of time on this page. Dylan referred to this as well. But I thought it might be helpful because our budget can look a little bit skewed these years because of the pandemic dollars, just to give you a table in the budget of the pandemic funding that we've received since fiscal year 2020. And you can see particularly in fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 in that table some really large amounts. But over the course of these years, about $576 million has gone through DCF from federal sources. The vast majority has had to do with the areas of child care. This doesn't include enhanced SNAP benefits, food assistance benefits people receive, because I think, as you know, SNAP benefits are not reflected, they're kind of off-budget items within the Kansas budget. So again, I wanted you to see that, because when you kind of compare the resources, as Dylan talked about, you can see that the funding is a little bit skewed. I might next move you. I think Dylan did a good job talking about some of the reappropriations and the recommendations for fiscal year 23. So I will just go ahead and move you past some of the charts and about fiscal year 23 that kind of really show you, as much as anything, again, kind of how the budget skewed a little bit, where child care is the largest federal funds in our budget for fiscal year 23, very, very unusual. And just move you on to page 20 of the document. I'm kind of getting into fiscal year 24. As Dylan said, in fiscal year 23, there are no supplementals. The adjustments that were made in the budget all had to do with caseload. So just very quickly on page 24, just kind of that high-level view of the agency budget, $832 million. And again, just on that page in that first line, you can see that reduction, again, of almost $178 million, again, really due to the pandemic relief dollars more than anything. So again, some references for you just to get a sense of the scope and scale of programs. On page 21, you can kind of see, if you think of all of our funding as an agency, almost half of the funding is in our prevention and protection services, child welfare area, and you can see the remainder on that chart. We've done something similar on the next pages where we break that out by state general fund and federal fund. On page 23, with the federal funds, our single largest federal source in DCF is the TANF block grant. The next largest federal funding source comes from child care. So I'll get straight into the budget pieces for 2024, a summary on page 26. The governor did recommend just under $11 million, $10.8 million for 6 enhancements, $7.7 million SGF. The other changes were to do with caseload, as Dylan talked about, and the reduction of the $300,000 from our budget for Hope Ranch. And I might just mention, I think I have a slide on Hope Ranch later. We have had a pilot project with Hope Ranch that the legislature has funded for 2 years within the DCF budget. So we have an existing grant with Hope Ranch. What the governor's office is recommending is that DCF might not be the right agency for that, and they're also suggesting that it go through a bid process. At this point, to my knowledge, in the current year, we still have that grant. Based on this recommendation, it's not in a different agency right now. I would say that last year, I think we had recommended during the legislative process that perhaps it be managed through the Attorney General's office because they have other grants for adult human trafficking. So again, not a commentary on the program at all, just more about where it might best fit. So it's not in our budget, and again, to my knowledge at this point for fiscal year 24, it would not be budgeted anywhere at this point. So in terms of the enhancements, on page 27 is just a table, and then I'll walk through each of those. Again, $10.8 million, 7.7 million SGF, and obviously that doesn't include the pay plan things that the governor has recommended around COLA or market rate salary adjustments. The first enhancement is to increase the relative rates for foster care. You can find a little bit more detail about that on page 28. What the governor's recommendation would allow us to do would be to pay relative and non-related kin placements at a rate that's 70% of the licensed foster home rate. And we've put a great priority on enabling youth in care to stay with relatives and kin. So again, this would increase those rates up to 70% of the licensed foster home rate. That's $5.1 million, just under half of the total enhancement dollars.
Madam Secretary, can you
Yes.
tell me, just to give me an idea, what do they get about?
Sure. There's a range of daily rates based on the level of intensity of the child. So for example, level 1, they currently are receiving $11.55 a day. That would go up to $17.64. And then it tiers up through a level 5. That could be, that one would not go up as much because they're closer right now. It would go from $64 to just over $66. The vast majority are in that level 1 or in level 2 right now. So it would go from the 1155 to 1764.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
The next couple of enhancements are areas that we don't actually talk about very much. It seems like when we talk about the DCF budget, we're in the area of vocational rehabilitation services, which is the part of our agency that really provides supports for individuals with a disability or who maybe have experienced a disability to help them re-enter the workforce. So this enhancement on page 29 is funding for a 10% rate increase for the providers and vendors that we use for these workforce services. Rates haven't been increased for several years, since I think 2014. Just like everywhere else, difficulty in staffing, difficult for those providers to maintain workforce. You'll note this is a really good investment for Kansas, not only because it helps people get back in the workforce, but this is a program that's funded 78% federal funds, 22% state funds. So the expenditure of $233,000 will bring us total funding of $1 million, again, to support those vocational rehabilitation providers. Then on the next page, in terms of the third enhancement, also within our rehabilitation services area, we would do a similar increase for those community organizations who provide support to those older individuals who are blind. We have some programs for older blind individuals to help them to continue living in their home rather than usually in an out-of-state institutional setting, and also for the Centers for Independent Living. would provide a 10% increase in their grants. So again, about $200,000 total for those two groups. The fourth enhancement is the Weekend Drive program. The legislature last year, there had been a bill that the Child Welfare Oversight Committee had recommended that did not pass, but then some funding was put in the budget through the budget process to support the Weekend Drive program. We do coordinate, Senator, with the funding that's available through the Comprehensive Transportation Bill. It provides funding to support, like to getting the driver's licenses and things. We can go a little bit farther. We can stretch those dollars a little bit further to help with things like car insurance and things like that. Our understanding, though, is that from the Comprehensive Transportation Bill, that provision of that bill will end after this year. So that will not be ongoing.
When I started talking about that, I think we did put a sunset
Yes,
because
yes.
it was a new program. So
Yes.
we'll have to reevaluate that before long, I guess.
Yes, but we have certainly been coordinating with it because we certainly wanted to make use of that as kind of a first dollar and then sort of supplement that with some of the other expenses that foster youth have. This has been a really positive program, in terms of just the ability of those young people in foster care to be able to seek employment and education opportunities as we think about self-sufficiency. So this enhancement, we're currently operating the program in our DCF East region. The enhancement would let us expand the program to our Wichita region. Again, $250,000 enhancement. The fifth enhancement keeps us continuing to talk about foster youth and older youth. This enhancement, it might sound familiar to you because last year you approved an increase in the subsidy that older youth can receive as they're aging out of foster care and transitioning to independence to $700 a month from what had been $350 a month. This, the governor's recommendation this year would increase it from $700 to about $1,077 per month, 100% of the poverty level, just really tie that to the poverty level. We really learned during the pandemic when there was some federal funds to increase it. And at that point, it was increased to $1,400, that made a significant difference in the stability of housing for those youth, the stability of them to have that stability in the community. And I would note that not every youth aging out of foster care, transitioning to adult independence, receives the maximum. It really kind of depends upon their living expenses, the income that they're making through their wages. So about 25% would get the maximum at the level of funding in this enhancement. About 25% wouldn't get anything just based on their level of income being above that. And 50% would be somewhere in the middle.
What's the age cap
So
on that?
I believe it's 21. I'm looking at my deputy secretary. She's nodding her head, so I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last enhancement, the governor's recommended an enhancement of $1.5 million from the state general fund to let us draw down an additional $2.3 million in federal child care funds, which would really mean that the state would be drawing down all the funds that we're eligible for. We've not done that for many years now, and it wasn't a priority during the pandemic when there were a lot of enhanced child care funds coming in, but this would allow us now to optimize that as some of those pandemic funds are going away. So those are the 6 enhancements that the governor's recommended, and we're grateful for that. I'm going to skip Senator past. You have a number of caseload charts that you can look at over the next few pages, and I'm going to just take you back to page 49. Just for a couple of status updates from some things you talked about last year, and just a couple of other quick updates. One, on page 49, I just wanted this committee to know that we will be in the rebidding process with regard to our foster care case management provider contracts. And so we'll be issuing an RFP by probably sometime in May, and new grants would be beginning in fiscal year 25. So again, we'll have one more extension of the current foster care case management grants, go through this large procurement process with new grants to begin July 1 of 2024. On page 50, last year, the legislature passed 2448, which put additional work requirements on what we call able-bodied adults without dependents in the SNAP program. If they were aged 18 to 49, and if they were not employed at least 30 hours a week. We went through some process with our federal partners to gain approval, and the program went live October 1st. We have 15 career navigators for implementation of that, and we're collaborating with 5 community organizations. There were no added resources placed in the budget through the legislative process last year, so we've really had to reallocate internally for the expanded population. Page 51, just very briefly, this is really a summary page for all of you. I mean, what does the termination of the public health emergency mean for DCF? One of the things that you will likely be hearing about in the coming weeks is there have been enhanced benefits under food assistance where people have been getting larger payment amounts, really for a couple of years. For some individuals who may be new to SNAP, that's all they've known. Those final enhanced SNAP benefits will be issued in March of 2023. That program ends in February. You'll see the average benefit will increase by about 49%. You know, increasing SNAP is a really common federal strategy. I mean, it helps low-income people during a recession, or in this case, during the pandemic. It really accelerates the economy, but that will be a significant impact, and I think a significant impact on our partners like food banks and things like that. I won't go through all of these, but I also would mention the third bullet. During the pandemic, similar to some of the Medicaid requirements, the rule about the rule limiting able-bodied adults without dependents to 3 months of SNAP benefits within a 3-year period was suspended. That rule will also be reinstated once the public health emergency ends, which is slated for May 11th. So that 3-month clock will start again then. We expect, as that phases out over the few months after that, that our food assistance caseload again will decrease about 25%. And then the other one I might mention, just because you all talked about it earlier, the pandemic water program, that was a new utility assistance program that was created. Again, kind of about $9 million that we were given to manage, that will also go away. So again, other things as well, I wanted to just focus on those.
Help me understand then. I have to go back to the Dylan's report. We funded that program, right? That you said was ARPA money.
Yeah, the water program. It was targeted federal dollars that were funded federally, flowed through the DCF budget.
And we're trying to fund it again without the federal.
No, we're not trying to fund it again. I'm just letting you know that the program will be going away.
Will go away.
The federal government did not extend that program, and it really ended up being kind of a one-time tranche of funds to states. There was some belief that it might become a permanent program, but it did not in some of the later federal legislation, so it will go away. I also just wanted to mention an update on the CWIS, the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. You all have been very interested and generous as a legislature in funding the planning dollars that we've needed for that program. As those of you who've been engaged in this budget know, we operate a lot of legacy systems that support our child welfare programs on aging mainframes. At this stage in the process, we have gone through and gotten approval through the federal planning process. We have now gotten some of the state approvals, and within the next few weeks, we will be issuing RFPs for the design and development of a new CWIS program, as well as a quality assurance and what's called an independent verification RFP as well that you need to do with large IT projects. As Dylan indicated, we still have funding left from some of the appropriations that have been made in the past, about $13 million to begin the work. What the governor's office has asked us to do, and this is a large project, it will cost significantly more than $13 million over the next 2 to 3 years. But what the governor's office has asked us to do is to, once we hear more from the vendors, to either submit a governor's budget amendment request or to put that in our revised budget next year, depending upon what that timing is going to look like. You know, that'll be a project where we're going to be asking bidders to kind of bid in kind of an agile way. You know, the system will have a lot of different modules, you know, intake, case management, provider management, et cetera, and to tell us how they might suggest what that looks like. You know, federally, it has to be a modular system. I mean, it could be that some parts could come on before others, but we'll have a better idea of the phasing and when and the totality of the resources we'll need after we get some input through that process. So again, you'll see that we had made a request that the governor did not support as an enhancement, but we do have, again, about $13.2 million remaining to begin that work, and we'll keep you posted as well as the governor's team posted as we learn more through that procurement process. I think I'll leave the rest, and we've basically given you updates on anything that you'd given us funding for last year, but those are the ones I really wanted to highlight, and I'll let you read the rest at your leisure. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for the Secretary? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Secretary Howard, for being here. I was just looking at the enhanced independent living subsidy for youth and the fact that the governor recommended a partial adoption of that. It just seems that it's covering at 100% of poverty, and it's like, would they be receiving anything else that would assist them? Because 100% of poverty, it's a step up, but it's a little step up.
Yeah, the subsidy amount would be 100% of the poverty level, but how we would base how much they receive is kind of based on their overall expenses and income. So in some instances, they would have income on top of that, and so. Again, it's a little bit of a balancing act, I mean, as those youth transition. And I would also just remind you, Senator, that it was $350 2 years ago. So we were really grateful to get the increase to $700 last year. And the ability just to tie it, say, like to the federal poverty level seems like a huge gain to us. Okay. So thank you.
All right, and Dylan, would you look up on the Hope Ranch, I know in the AG's office, there are some domestic violence programs, and I think the governor's office may have some too. I'm not 100% sure, but could you look up some of those items when you get a chance so we can see what is in the AG's office and the governor's office? So, all right, any other questions for the Secretary? Senator Petty.
I just had a note here for myself. Under that fostering connection MOE, that enhancement, I know the governor doesn't recommend that for enhancement. Can you just expand a little bit on that one?
You know, I think as Dylan talked about it, you know, there are just sometimes requirements to be able to demonstrate certain maintenance of effort in exchange for receiving certain federal funds. That has been a hard one to keep up with. So we've really tried to find some resources in our budget to kind of continue to chip away. We used a little bit of reappropriation going into this fiscal year as well. I mean, again, it's something we'll have to address to be able to meet those needs. But again. We try to chip away kind of each year in how we might reallocate resources or funds to kind of meet or count towards that. And I might ask, if you don't mind, I might ask my Deputy Secretary, Dan Levine, our Chief Operating Officer. He may have a little bit more context for you on that one.
I don't have much more. What it is, though, in federal law, there's not a requirement of when it has to be expended. So some of these balances we've been carrying for years. And like Secretary said, when we have reappropriation funds or something like that, we try to spend down the MOE balances on that. This would have just caught us all the way up in 1 year, and Governor decided not to do it that way.
So when you say when it says there's a 7.8 million deficit, when you say caught you up, is it catch you up on that 7.8 million?
Right. We would have had to issue grants to spend that in a post-adoptive service that's required, and it would have caught us up. Else, that just carries on, and over some period of time, as we're drawing 4E, we're going to have to spend that maintenance effort portion.
Okay,
So it's just going to take a few more years.
thank you.
And we've not been given any indication from our federal partners or anything that we're facing any penalty or anything, so. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the Secretary? I don't see any right now.
Thank you.
We're going to go to our conferees, and just most of you know my rules, which are tell us what we need to know, tell us what you want us to know. Please don't read your testimony unless you have some reason why you need to. So again, it looks like familiar faces out there. I think you all know. And the first one, I'm going to botch the last name. Is it Gail Kozad? How do you, over there? And you can correct me. CEO of the Kansas Children's Service League. Did I mess that up?
Is it the red? Okay, I'm on.
You're
It's
on.
Gail Kozad.
Zad.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you for having me. I will not read my written testimony, but I do want to highlight that really what we're talking about, Kansas Children's Service League serves as the Kansas chapter for Prevent Child Abuse America. And we know from our work in this particular area that starting young with families that are new, that have young children, we have the most impact. We have the most return on your investment. And particularly our Healthy Families America home visitation program. It's an evidence-based program. It serves parents who are at higher risk because they come to us with substance use, mental illness, underemployment or unemployment, low education. And what we are doing is not just working with them on improving child development, but really working on their skills and in their goals, often towards employment and often towards furthering their education so that they can make a livable wage and be contributing members to society. So while we talk about this program as child abuse prevention, and it does impact children that are decreasing children in the foster care system, we know that, but it also has the impact of workforce development because we're also working with the parents. And so I come to you because I will always beat the drum for increasing money for prevention work that is going to be more cost effective. We know that for home visitation, you can, for every dollar invested, you can save, and this is a low estimate, but $5 in future costs like foster care, special education, and juvenile justice or corrections. And that's just for children during their childhood. That doesn't include the costs that you save as they become adults. So my ask is really, to your question, Chair McGinn, is to increase our funding so that we can serve more families. And I have in the testimony that we would like to increased by $972,000, so it's kind of an oddball number, but it would allow us to actually expand into some counties that we had proposed to expand and have not been able to do that so far, so.
Well, thank you for doing the math. I mean, some people just go grab $1 million, you know, hey, it's almost $1 million. So appreciate that. On the expansion, I think you said you serve 75 more families in Kansas.
Yes.
And you would divide that up amongst your different office locations?
Correct. So we are currently in about 33 counties. We are hoping to add 8 additional counties through Families First funding that is already allocated in DCF's budget. And then we would like to add an additional about approximately 4 counties.
So is it 8 or is it 4?
Four with this additional funding.
4 with this, but 8 was through the,
Families First. That is already in DCF's budget.
oh, okay, thank you. All right, any other questions for Gail? Senator Petty.
Gail, good to see you.
Good to see
you. So that's what I was going to ask the question. You answered it. Thank you about Families First. So you already are receiving the funding through the Families First and the expansions through the 8 counties. This is correct?
Correct. And we also receive funding from TANF as well for healthy families. So 33 counties, and some of that funding comes from current Families First, from TANF, some other random dollars. And then the expansion will be an enhancement for Families First and already in DCF's budget. We'd like to do 4 more counties.
So this 972,000 is for the expansion into 4 other counties.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions for Gail? I don't see any. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Okay, get to botch everybody's name. We'll just work on John Olsey, Executive Director for Hope Ranch for Women. And you can correct it, please.
You said it
I got it?
quite correctly, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to first just apologize for my coughing and my facial contortions here. A few weeks ago, I thought I was having a stroke, literally, and they ran all the tests and everything else, and it turns out I have Bell's palsy going on. So hopefully, a couple of months from now, I'll be okay. But it's kind of a weird thing and all that sort. But anyway.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Chairwoman McGinn and members, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to share. You have before you a testimony that I've written, and I want to honor you, Chairwoman, and not just read that through. So I will do my best to not do that. But 2 years ago, I stood here and provided testimony as to the need for helping women recover from this evil of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And before I started this position 2.5 years ago, I was kind of blindsided as to how awful it is and how bad it really is. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your support because I'd like to share a few stories with you briefly. If I had an hour, I could share a lot more. But I'm grateful for your help and your support, and I'm imploring and asking you to continue to do that, to support these women that we serve. I'd like to first share a story about a gal named Sue, who I changed her name just for protection. But Sue grew up in Lawrence. Her birth mom was a prostitute, and Sue herself was then trafficked out by her mom. Throughout grade school, throughout middle school, and into high school. And at the age of 19, Sue came to us, homeless, struggling with complex mental health needs and suicidal ideation. Today, after about a year and a half, she has been accepted into 4 different colleges, and she is looking forward to attending college this fall, majoring in elementary education because she said to me, John, I know what to look for in elementary age kids because I walked through it. And I want to give back, and I want to help these young children. Victories like that are because of you and because of your support. In our community program, we completely redeveloped this year and kicked off a new program with mentors and case management, allowing us to better collaborate with other community organizations. And as a result, you see it on the sheet here, 5 women secured Section 8 housing, 3 women secured higher wage jobs, 4 secured safe housing, 3 received their driver's license, 1 received her driver's license back, 1 regained custody of her children, 2 are pursuing child support, and 1 is seeking to attend a nursing program in the fall. Again, I could go on with more stories, but the reality is that we have a long way to go in recalling the truth that the U.S. Justice Department identified Kansas as an originating state for human trafficking. So the question I'd ask you to consider is this: as policymakers and as elected leaders, how can you respond to this growing problem? How could you not continue to fund organizations to help these women find healing and find hope? You are familiar with Hope Ranch for Women. We're a 501c faith-based organization. We've received an A+ rating from the National Trafficking of Sheltered Alliance. And I come before you on behalf of these women who are homeless, who are unemployed, who are in need of safe, secure, and sufficient housing, and in need of treatment for unbelievably complex mental health issues. And I'm asking for your support. Today, we're asking for $300,000 of SGF funds to propel this organization forward, to allow us to invest further in helping women find hope and find healing. Again, I refer to the testimony and would love to help answer any questions that you might have.
John, how many women have you served? Because you've been around about a few years now, on average a year.
So with both our residential and our community program, we probably are in the range of 20 to 25.
With both of them?
Yes. It's kind of, I mean, you know, they're free to come and go, and so that kind of makes it difficult at times to measure. But yes, in that range.
And then on the Section 8 housing, do they kind of go into some Section 8 housing until, well, I guess because it's already a federal program required, and if they start making good money, they've got to move out. So you just get them started there, and then it goes from there.
Yeah, and we continue to provide, we have full-time staff case management going to help them and to walk along with them. And if they get to a point where they need to move, then, you know, help them with that next step.
And I know you're located in Wichita. Do you have any kind of numbers as to how many women you help across the state? I mean, is there a way?
I mean, I could probably research that for you. We do receive several women. We have received several women over the course of this year from the Topeka prison system. We have a great working relationship with them, and they have written letters of endorsement for us in the past.
All right. Questions for John? Others? All right. Well, thank you for your testimony. It seems like I've got one in the back of my head, and I'm trying to pull it out, and the file is stuck. Do the women, I mean, they're just probably all age, you know, from youth to.
Yeah, so the youngest that we serve is 18, and then
The youngest
from
you
there.
serve is 18.
Yeah, 18 and up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming
Sure.
up. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next we have Don M. Wilson, Executive Director, Resource Center for Independent Living. Is it Don? Dion?
Very good.
Dion.
Dion. Because
Dion?
it's Dion.
Dion.
Yes.
All right. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm a little nervous. I just thought I'd put that right out there in the universe. My name's Deon Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of the Resource Center for Independent Living. Our main office is in Osage City, Kansas. We also have offices in El Dorado, Iola, Emporia, and from those, we provide our required, we call them our core services for people with disabilities across all ages and all disability types. We are grassroots organizations, consumer-run organizations, meaning over half of our staff, and pretty much all of our board of directors are people with disabilities themselves. We're grateful to receive the Center for Independent Living grant from DCF, and the governor has recommended the 10% increase to our grant, and that's what we're here to ask your support for it. Our current grant is $293,000 a year. We serve 15 counties with those funds. The additional funds, should we receive them, that about $29,000, we need to amp up our services from our Iola office. I only have a half-time person there, and we need additional funds so that we can have more impact on the community members that live in that area. The programs and services, people come to us from various different places, and the impact that our passionate staff have in helping other people with disabilities learn skills and access the resources they need to live independently are incredibly powerful. Every month I get those consumer success stories from our staff, and it hits home how even though we're not very fancy, we have great impact on people, helping them find housing. Employment is critically important. To ever get out of poverty, you have to be employed. Helping them with transportation, it's a big issue. And then plus all of those other things that people just need to learn how to do to live independently, from budgeting, cooking, even laundry, all very basic things sometimes. Other times it's more complex with helping people access higher education, and healthcare, get their healthcare needs met. So also our center receives one of the grants to provide services to the older blind population. We have a certified orientation and mobility specialist. She serves over 30 counties by herself. She works with individuals over the age of 55 primarily to learn how to travel safely in their own homes and in their own communities. Again, we just want to honor people's wishes to live independently, and usually that means living in their own homes, in their own communities. So thank you very much for hearing me out today.
Well, thank you for being here today. Are there questions for Deon? Senator Petty.
I just wanted to clarify. So Deon,
Yes.
I could tell you were nervous as you're walking. I was like, okay, she's going to the den of lions or something. Hope it wasn't that bad. But so your request, that addition of $216,783, is that in the governor's recommendations?
We're asking your support of the 10% increase, which for our grant would be $29,000 a year. I don't know where you're looking. Oh, total, yes.
It is in the governor's, okay.
It is.
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Senator Kirshen.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I appreciate your testimony there. My question was, given the inflationary times we have right now, and are there enough jobs out there for people to be more employed? I mean, your folks, can they at least find work if they needed it?
There seems to be plenty of jobs. It's an unusual environment right now when you look at the numbers. I can speak more for even within our own agency and our own staffing. It's hard to find people to do to do the work. But as far as our work with people with disabilities, we always encourage employment first to help achieve that independence, even that financial independence. It varies, everybody's individual, but I am glad to say it seems that the culture is changing with employers. People are more open to hiring people with disabilities, especially that may have something to do with the low unemployment rates. They're opening their minds more, and so we've been able to achieve some more success there. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the information, and I play in your golf tournament every year I can at Sand Creek in Newton.
Oh, is that in Wichita? Yeah, the Independent Living Resource Center in Wichita. Yeah. They do great fundraisers
Put on a
there.
great event, so.
Awesome.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, next we have Tammy Thomas. Yay, Tammy Thomas has an easy name I can pronounce.
You nailed it. You nailed
State
it.
Director of Safe Families for Children.
Yes, I am. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. It's a privilege, and I will certainly try not to read my presentation. So, Chairwoman McGinn and the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here. I am the State Director for Safe Families for Kansas, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide an update regarding our expansion. From last I visited with you, we're now in southeast Kansas, the Wichita region, as well as the Kansas City region. We're a volunteer-driven, professionally supportive movement, serving Kansas family in crisis and beyond. We focus on family preservation. We are not foster care, nor are we adoptive services. Parents that would engage with us maintain their parental rights and full custody of their children, and it's our desire to work with these families prior to DCF engagement. However, we do serve families that on a TDM call, we get called in, and we work alongside DCF, and it's always been a great experience. We connect vulnerable families with qualified, vetted host families. Our mission is to keep children safe and families together. Our CEO and founder, Dave Anderson, says that we believe parents are capable of being the parent that their children need. Through Safe Families, we build relationships with our volunteers, creating a circle of support around not only the child, but also the parent. We're family-focused, not program-focused. The volunteer application is extensive. There's references, training, FBI background checks, KBI background checks, fingerprinting, home walkthroughs, and we're also, Safe Families is a licensed child placing agency through our partnership with DCF. This is an important layer of oversight and accountability. Our successes thus far have been a 97% success rate in maintaining connections, meaning the children that we host go back home to their parents, be it mom and dad or mom or dad. And that feels good, and that's only possible because of the generous support of this legislature and the support of DCF. From January 1st to December 31st of 2022, Safe Families Kansas served 127 children, meaning those children did not engage in the foster care system. We served 65 families, meaning those families did not experience the trauma of separation from their children. And we were able to utilize 68 volunteers who opened their heart and home to form relationships and bond with vulnerable families and continue to be a resource even as the family moves forward and perhaps they do engage in other crisis. We're there for them. We've also had the opportunity to build our team, our staff team. And at the close of 2021, we employed 5 people, including myself. Today, we're fully staffed in all 3 regions of the Kansas City region, the Wichita region, as well as the Southeast region. We also have been able to increase the number of hours we have our intake hotline monitored. Used to, at the end of 21, we had our hotline monitored Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Most crises for families happen after that time. So now we're expanding our days 7 days a week, Sunday to Sunday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which means weekly we offer 39 hours exactly, to be available for if someone calls our hotline or if someone goes in via our link on the web and we get a request for help. And if you take that out to a year, that's an additional 2,028 hours that we are there to serve. Many times successes lead us to new opportunities as well, and that's occurring in Safe Families. We have been working closely with the folks down in McPherson, Kansas, through the faith community. We have an organization that is supporting Safe Families and becoming established there. We have been in contact with the program director of the McPherson Housing Coalition. We have also partnering with the Sheriff's Department in Newton, Kansas, who then has also introduced us to the school resource officers in that area as well. In the Manhattan, Fort Riley area, and to include Salina, we were contacted by the leadership of Fort Riley. They had 2 new families come to their base. One was in Michigan, one was in San Diego. They both serve, those families both serve in the Army. And they have come to Fort Riley and are gung-ho about starting a Safe Families chapter in Fort Riley. They have the understanding of what it is, they know the impact of what it is, and what it can do for their community and the families of their community. So we're very, very excited about that engagement with them. And so my ask today is to expand Safe Families Kansas into the McPherson, Fort Riley, Salina, and Manhattan area. I'm requesting $350,000 additional to do this work. And the return on that investment is that children are safe and families are together. For just a moment, I would like to share 2 stories with you. One is through Advent Health System in the Kansas City area. We're working with those social workers, especially the trauma unit, when a mom comes in and has been assaulted. Those children, many times she'll bring her children to the hospital. The staff at the hospital do not watch the children. So if they don't have a relative that can come, these children will then go into police protective custody while a medical exam goes on, an interview is done with the police department. They've bonded with Safe Families, and now they have a list of women that they can call to, no matter the time of day, night, week, whatever. And we will respond to that request to go in and sit with these children while mom goes through those processes. Because what happens so many times is mom will leave the hospital with their child and never come back. And so this has been a real key for us. Currently, we've also had a call working with, think of parents with children in the NICU. You have women that have children and they've got a couple of other kids, and it's just not a setup for success to begin with. But now we're working with Children's Mercy and even Advent Health as parents experience something unforeseen with the birth of a child and perhaps they have to go into a NICU. Many times the mom doesn't get to go as many hours as she wants to because she doesn't have anyone to watch her other kids. So we have Safe Families volunteers stepping up to take kids to school, pick their kids up from school, while mom can spend a day and bond with her newborn. And that's actively going on right now. We have a case at Children's Mercy. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing in Kansas and across Kansas. And it is my strong desire to be able to expand out to the McPherson, Salina, Fort Riley, Manhattan areas. But I want to thank you, Chairwoman McGinn, and this committee for allowing me to provide updates to you. Questions?
Thank you for being here and sharing about the program. So are you on a list for DCF, or, how do people stumble upon you?
Okay. Many times it's just by word of mouth, or DCF can refer them. We're building relationships in all of our areas with schools and shelters, daycares, and we're getting to where when people ask for help on the internet, Safe Families pops up. And so we're getting, let me say this, another resource that we've had that I have found amazing, families that we have served have referred families to us. And because you'll get a call, you'll say, well, the Smith said that, you know, maybe you could help me. And you're thinking, who is this family? So you look it up on the database, and lo and behold, we maybe hosted their kids or intervened somehow or other. So, and the important thing too is parents have to call us. They have to reach out themselves. If DCF is the referring source, many times the social worker and the mom or their parent, dad, you know, will join the phone call. So there's a variety of ways that we get noted.
Any other questions for Tammy? All right, thank you.
Pleasure.
Audrey Schimmer. Close. From Three Rivers, Inc. Welcome to the committee.
Yep. My name is Audrey Stramer. I'm the executive director of Three Rivers. We are the Center for Independent Living that covers most of Northeast Kansas. There are 9 state-funded centers, one that gets federal funding in the state. And I think one of the things that we've come to realize this year is that Centers for Independent Living, we are always here advocating for our consumers, we're advocating for people with disabilities, and we've forgotten to tell the story of exactly what Centers for Independent Living do. And there has been a lot of confusion over this last month. So we'll just share a little bit. We have several handouts that we provided that Centers for Independent Living have mandated core services that we are expected to provide and willingly provide. They come down from the feds and are part of our state grants. And I will share with you, if you have I have put together the spreadsheet that breaks it out for everyone so you can see this funding by center. As I have been working through with our new legislators in our area, and I have been sharing with them so that we want you to know that we exist, so that you can make referrals, because there's this entire swath of individuals in Kansas that get forgotten, that people don't know where to refer to them. People with physical disabilities, with head injuries, they don't necessarily, they may not have Medicaid. They come from all walks of life, and we are the only entity that serves all of these individuals. So as I've worked through, working with our new legislators, and I've explained to them that we are thrilled that the governor has put a 10% increase in the budget, and I share with them the funding amount, and they think that's what Three Rivers is getting. I explain, no, this amount funds the entire state. So we serve, as Centers for Independent Living, serve tens of thousands of individuals with very low funds. And so we have come to the realization we can't keep doing this. It's time to advocate that we get the funding so that we can adequately provide all of these services. Our center alone had received 200 additional referrals this past year, more than normal. People are beginning to hear about us more in the community coming out of COVID. We have more people with long COVID. We have just a variety of issues that has increased the number of referrals. So there's no way to say you're on a waiting list. If a person comes to you and they have a disability, they're in need, they're homeless, they don't get to be put on a waiting list. We just have to find a way to squeeze them in. And it's kind of taking a toll on our staff too. They're getting exhausted, they're getting stressed out, and it's time for us to seek help for them. So I appreciate your support on this. I would also definitely want to point out, from my testimony, different from others, we happen to get a larger grant. The grants for the Centers for Independent Living vary, as is on the spreadsheet. It has nothing to do with the area you served. It really has only to do with when you started receiving the grant. So for me, a 10% increase is wonderful. It will be really helpful. For some, it's not enough to really help them even have an impact for the level of services they need to provide. So,
Questions for Audrey? I don't see any. It's good to see you guys back. It just seems like you guys used to be more active here at the Capitol. So glad to see you back again.
thank you.
Next, we have Allie Devine, Kansas Alliance of the Boys and Girls Club.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. And I want to apologize first and foremost that members of the Boys and Girls Club are not here today. They were all in training. And we had some last minute shifts that put me in charge. And I hope you won't hold it against them if I perform terribly. We have spent some time and put together some ideas, and I want to walk through a couple things. In front of you, you should have a packet, and the first thing is the pages we'll talk about the programs and we'll talk about our request. I want you to note the fact sheet. I reference it. It's kind of the what's what of who's who of Boys and Girls Club. But the last sheet in the back is one that I think you will find really interesting. And I can read it without my readers, but it is very small. These are the 70 sites that the Boys and Girls Clubs serve. We have 12 local organizations and 70 sites in 19 communities. And the reason why I point that out is because in the city of Topeka and across the state, in Topeka in particular, the Boys and Girls Clubs are running the before and after school and out of school programs in every single school district. Most recently, the city of Emporia School District asked the Boys and Girls Clubs of South Central Kansas that are focused in Wichita area to come to Emporia and run the before and after school programs and the out of school programs or summer programs. Largely because superintendents know that kids who go to the clubs have success rates and they don't have brain drain during the summer. So just walking through a couple things, I want to tell you who we serve. We serve youth age 5 to 18, and they are in places where the youth are the most in need. They're serving, the clubs are serving families while the parents are working, and it provides a safe place for before, after school, and summer programs. The club programs are focused on health and wellness. They're focused on character and leadership. They're focused on education and career development. And I can tell you, if you get an opportunity to visit a club, which we would welcome, the first thing you're going to find is when the kids get off the school bus, they eat a snack and then they do their homework. And that's been the success for the clubs. In total, the clubs raise 44% of their annual income from private sources and another 56% from federal, state, or local sources. Last year, the club served 18,000 children in Kansas. In 2022, I'm sorry, that was in 2021. In 2022, it's projected, the numbers are still being accumulated, that they served 20,000 youth. During the pandemic, when everybody else was closed, they were opened. They opened sites. Churches and locations across the state asked them if they had an empty building to make a club site where they could spread out and still maintain the clubs being open. I want to go to a couple of facts, and then I want to talk about why we're here. I had to ask this question twice. Last year, the clubs served 24 million meals and snacks. And they had wellness checks for youth development activities for another 460,000 families. I said, are we sure? They said, yes, we're sure. We know the counts. One thing the Boys and Girls Clubs are good at is maintaining good records and good oversight. And during the deliberation of some of the after-school programs and childcare programs, some of the formats that the clubs use to monitor and know what their processes are were adopted by the SPARK committees in monitoring the programs. So why are we here? Here's where we are in the budget process. The clubs have received $2.6 million through TANF, and it has been their annual grant or 3-year grant that expires in June of this year. We are asking first for that $2.6 million to be extended, and then we're asking for increases. If you're on page 2 of my working document, we're at point 1A1. The clubs are asking for $770,000 for an increase costs, and we know that the costs overall have increased between 40 and 60%, so we've given you a 30% increase number. The next thing we're talking about, and I'm on 1A2. We have found, as others have found, that youth are struggling coming out of the pandemic. We went to the Joint Committee on Child Welfare System Oversight that was held in the interim this summer. And we made a request for an appropriation, and they recommended bringing it back to you. And what we're looking for is to hope to join with the community mental health centers and do some professional training of club staff, and also have social workers come to the clubs. The question is how could that mesh with the pilot projects that are going on through the schools? The schools have implemented social workers in the schools, and the question was, how can we blend those with the after-school programs? The club directors tell me that the biggest problem is those programs end when school ends, and then they come to the clubs, and especially out of school time is when we often need the help. So we've done some initial discussions with community mental health centers. We are far from knowing exactly how this is going to work, but we wanted you to know, and we would like to start a pilot to make it work. The next request is 1B, so what we talked about in 1A was fiscal year 2024, and fiscal year 2025 is the request of 2.7 million, and that's to take what we're doing in 2024 and continuing it on with slight growth. The next area is academic support for at-risk youth in after-school and summer programs. And this is the part where the numbers are really good of academic success. I didn't have those to put together, but we'll bring those back to you if you want. We're currently funded through ESSER at 1.5 million. As you know, that's going to expire in June of 2024. We're asking for that to be replaced and then expand it by another 750,000. And finally, if you go to the next page, we would carry it over 750 or 300,000 for staffing costs and 450,000 to implement an online math and reading program that has been highly successful in Texas. They have had extraordinary responses, and we would like to try it here. Again, and then for fiscal year 2025, we would continue and increase it slightly. Now, I would like to stand here and tell you a cost per head per day, because that's easy, but it's not easy in these programs, because while we don't count duplicate numbers or kids, we don't count kids twice in our 19 or 20,000, but we have a rotating number of kids. So it's hard for us to say exactly what kid's going to have what program at what day, but they track it and they know the need in these programs. So when we put down, we're going to serve another 7,000 youth, they have the documentation to track that. So that's a very high level overview. I would ask this, I know your time is short today. I would like to come and visit with each of you and bring one of the club directors to answer all your questions, because they're doing unbelievable work and I don't want to undersell it.
Questions for Ally? Senator Petty.
Thank you. So Ally, there's no Boys and Girls Clubs in Wyandotte County.
Did we lose it on the chart?
There's no Boys and Girls Clubs in Wyandotte County on your.
Well, I know there are some. There's some in KCK, maybe it's not over in Wyandotte County far enough.
ACK is Wyandotte County.
That's what I know. I know it's there, but I don't know why it's not on the sheet.
Okay, I thought there was two, so that was a
I
question.
know there's one there because I
Confirm
talked to
that
the
later
CEO.
on.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, as I'm looking, it's like, well, I don't see him.
Here it is. Hang on. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. I'll get back to you. And I know they're in the schools and after program. I know they're there. I have to tell you, I took this from the regional director who was standing in for somebody else yesterday. So we had a lot of mix-up here going on.
So I just want to be sure I understand this chart. This is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
So in the first year, that $1 million pilot, a mental health pilot, and then in 25, so in 24, it's a 1.7 million request, and then to cover the additional 777,000 and 1 million for the pilot, and then in 25, it's a 2.77 million
Okay.
for growth. Is that correct?
Yeah, here, I'm going to make it easier because smarter people than me put this together. So I had to redo it in Ally speak. So if you start out at point 1A, fiscal year 2024, we start with 2.6 million requests. That is our current TANF grant. We ask for 777,000 for cost increases. And then we would add 1 million for the new mental health program. For that piece, for fiscal year 2024, would be 4,377,000. Okay? Now, let's go to fiscal year 2025. We pick up that 4,377,000, would add 1 million to it because we're going to serve another 1,000 kids, and that gets you to roughly 5,377,000. Does that make it easier? I have a chart here that I can give you. Okay, and then we get to point 2. We start with the ESSER replacement of 1,500,000. We add 750,000 for cost increases for a fiscal year 2024 number of 2,250,000. In fiscal year 2025, we're anticipating expansion, and that gets you to 2,700,000. Easier? And I apologize for it, but we've reformatted it and I can bring it back to you.
All right, other questions? Thank you, Ally. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ally, just real quick, I'm a little confused on the mental health. One of the reasons I thought that we partnered with CMHCs in the school system is so that students would have access to mental health services outside of the school day. I thought that's one reason we didn't want school staff providing that, because we know typically happens outside of school hours that they need that support. So are you saying that's not happening?
I think first of all, it's our understanding that was kind of a pilot, and it's not in every school. That's the first thing that my understanding from the hearings and from talking to directors. And we could be wrong in that. The second piece is the club directors have told me that literally the question came up. We had a joint meeting with the community mental health people. We talked about what happens after 3 o'clock. How do we merge these pieces? And the answer is it's working in some areas, it's not in others. We're not there yet. We haven't figured out the roads yet. And again, I asked it repeatedly, how are we going to fix this? And literally, we are at the beginning of the discussions.
Follow up, if I may, Madam Chair. My second question has to do with the funding for the math and reading for learning loss. I believe the governor has approved a $1,000 per student basically savings account for students to use toward learning loss. And if you have 20,000 students you serve, could they not use some of that money to pay for the $450,000?
Was that just recently announced?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we've had some email traffic on it. We'll look into it more. I thought the clubs, the response was the clubs is we felt like the families could access it, but we don't know to what extent yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we're in aren't we in 62 or 67 schools now in the mental health districts or something like that?
I'm not sure how many, but I know it's expanding. I'm not sure how broad.
It'd be nice to have a map of that, of what we're covering across the state. All right, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate your time.
Next, we have Rachel Marsh, the Children's Alliance of Kansas. Welcome, Rachel.
Good afternoon, Chairman McGinn and members of the committee. Thanks so much for your time. I represent the Children's Alliance of Kansas, and we're an association, some of you heard a little bit more about us last week, that represents the child welfare providers across Kansas. And this can be from child abuse and neglect prevention all the way through psychiatric residential treatment and everywhere in between. One of our main membership focuses child placing agencies, and you'll hear a little bit about the perspective of child placing agencies in our request today. We support the governor's budget for DCF, their proposals, and we appreciate the efforts that DCF has made. We want to thank you especially for your investment in the child welfare workforce last year. We heard so many positive stories about people who were really feeling supported and needed those funds and were able to stay in their positions because you invested in our workforce at a really critical time. And we also have seen success in our Family First Prevention Services Act, and I want to continue to make sure that you're aware we value that program, and it has helped us reduce the number of children in foster care, and by doing so also helped us improve in our placement stability for youth with more complex needs, because we've been able to focus on some of that early community intervention. Unfortunately, there are some real critical issues in the child welfare system today that you're familiar with, and I don't believe they're addressed fully in the proposed DCF budget. And I'd like to talk about what our requests would be. Something that we have seen in Kansas recently, we've been analyzing it, but as we've analyzed it, we've seen it's a historical trend. Kansas has an unusually high number of older youth entering foster care, and it's not because of child maltreatment necessarily. It's because of gaps in our corrections services, gaps in our IDD services, and gaps in our mental health care services. By the time a child comes to child welfare, the public actually thinks that they're going to be treated, we're going to get them what they need, and we have continued to look to those other agencies and other support services to get them what they need. And what we have found over and over again for a number of years is the gaps in the communities apply to foster parents too. And we need your help to fill in those gaps with those older youth with complex needs. One of the really positive steps that DCF has taken in the last year is to develop a licensing level of therapeutic foster care. So as the Secretary mentioned, therapeutic foster care is one level of care. So you can have a basic level or a specialized level all the way up to therapeutic. Therapeutic is new and it requires a lot of intensive support from your child placing agency. But when we added a licensing level, we didn't add a program development to go with it. And we would like to ask your support to make sure that when we invest in our foster homes at the therapeutic level, that we're actually providing them the multi-layered supports that are integrated in their communities so they can be successful with those children. If you imagine maybe a trained social work professional or an educator with special ed experience, even that person at a therapeutic foster care level, they're going to need respite. They're going to have crisis support needs. They're going to need particular training about the needs of the population of youth that they're taking into their home. So we have an ask that this committee add $6 million to the DCF budget to ensure that DCF funds therapeutic foster care program development as opposed to just has a licensing that we're somehow child placing agencies are supposed to invest in without those additional supports. We need in-house therapists using services that are not necessarily covered by our Medicaid state plan. We need reliable attendant care, especially during transition times for children in the mornings and after school that can cause the most types of crisis that can develop. We need a recruitment plan for foster parents. Our demographics of children in foster care are changing, and we need to recruit foster parents that can meet the needs of the children with the higher level of care that are coming into care today. We need training, and we need real-time, in-person crisis response available within a reasonable distance from the therapeutic foster care home. So that's our first request. The second request we have is for you to help us support youth with delinquency behaviors. I know that this is not a new issue. This committee has heard me here before talking about challenges for youth with delinquency-related complex needs. What we have seen is that when a child is placed in foster care as an alternative to a juvenile justice charge, which is happening across the state, but based on the fact that they didn't get a charge, they are deemed not a risk and therefore not eligible to get the services available in the communities. So not only do we have challenges getting our corrections dollars that have been saved through juvenile justice reform to our communities, especially for the children entering foster care, they're specifically excluded in many ways because we're choosing foster care as an alternative to juvenile justice, even for the very same behaviors. So I want to be real clear about our delinquency challenges. Foster care is the place we're sending our youth, but foster care is the place with no evidence-based services that have been invested. We have it before foster care with families through Family First, and we have it through KDOC in juvenile justice. Well, we don't have evidence-based services reaching these children in the foster care system, and it's a crisis for our public safety. It's a crisis for safety for our children and for our social workers. We do have services, functional family therapy, multi-systemic treatment, and family-centered treatment that can reach these children if we expand and get those services to the foster children in the foster care homes. So we're requesting $4 million added to the DCF budget to ensure that the youth with delinquency behaviors who enter foster care receive evidence-based services. And I know you would say, why is that the services not coming from the KDOC dollars? And I will just say, because we were excluded, community-based providers were not excluded as being able to provide or receive those funds through that legislation. Finally, something you may not be, almost finally, something you may not be familiar with that we have seen as an emerging concern in foster care is the number of youth who've been on the IDD wait list that are entering foster care simply because they can't get the IDD services in the community. I know you're familiar with this concern. And we've had a discussion about the community support waiver that might be a future possibility. And we support the development of a community support waiver. But today, we're asking you to consider those children that are entering in and have entered into foster care simply because of IDD needs that are not being met. And again, similar to the delinquency issue, when you place a child in foster care for an IDD need, it doesn't mean that we have access to that IDD service if they don't have a workforce, if they're not available, or for whatever reason that barrier is there. So we're asking for $2 million for DCF to go ahead and stop the referral of children with IDD into foster care and to actually put those dollars into in-home services and attendant care through Title IV dollars as opposed to through through state general fund dollars as opposed to through waiting for it to work out in Medicaid when it's not working right now. So those are all issues I think that you're familiar with, and those are the solutions that we would bring so that we can do a better job with these youth with complex needs to continue to actually help the youth that are coming to the foster care system. We talk a lot about early childhood, we talk about brain development, but we don't often stop and think about older youth with these challenges. Their brains are still developing too. They are not a lost cause. We should not be forgetting them as if we can't reach them. We have these evidence-based services where we can intervene. We can literally change their brain pathways as they get older if we actually provide the services. But right now, we keep waiting for the communities to provide the services, and it's not happening. So we're asking for you to help us provide those services in the foster care system. Our last request relates to the child welfare workforce. We've looked ahead
at long-term solutions, and we've done some research on what works in child welfare. And what we've learned is that the quality of your supervision and your satisfaction with your child welfare supervisor is the primary indicator of whether you will stay in child welfare practice or not. So we have a tough workforce situation across the state. We have a national child welfare challenge in workforce, but we know supervisor development is essential. The KU has led a federally funded grant program over the last 5 years called Can Coach, and it has had positive retention impacts for our workforce, but the federal funding grant cycle is ending in October 1st, I think. So we're asking, actually, we've been asked to receive the Can Coach coaching program within the Children's Alliance of Kansas. The steering committee decided that that would be the right place to put a long-term sustainable coaching model for child welfare social work, because we serve as a neutral entity that does have and do some training. And so they have asked us to consider receiving that, and that's been the recommendation of the steering committee. So we're asking for $750,000, which is the budget that they provided to me for the Children's Alliance to be able to sustain that program into the future. So I'm sorry for my somewhat concerning comments, but we want to be frank with you about what the challenges continue to be in foster care so that you can help us improve the outcomes for youth. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions for Rachel? No. No. All right, you wore us down. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak to the Department of Children and Families budget? Anyone else? All right, committee members, you see that you have written only from, God, I hate botching somebody's name when they're not even here to, anyway, Michael Sojina, Chief Executive Officer, The Whole Person, Angie Sanger, Executive Director, Independent Connection, and Cindy Unruh, Executive Director, Independent Living Resource Center in Wichita. All right, well, thank you all for being here and testifying. If there's nothing else to come before us, we are adjourned.